Hey guys, tonight we trudge across sun-baked dunes under a slow, yawning sky, and you can almost feel the heat rising off the sand in lazy waves. The wind whispers tiny secrets, brushing across your arms like it's trying to tell you something ancient. You probably won't survive this trek if all you packed was a water bottle and a snack bar, but that's part of the charm, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time. I like knowing who's joining me from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stumble upon a cluster of desert tablets, half buried in sand, their edges smoothed by centuries of wind. These aren't your typical inscribed stones. The symbols twist and curl in patterns that feel almost like someone was doodling in a very patient, cosmic notebook. Mainstream historians have long recognized the Sumerians for their cuneiform scripts etched on clay tablets, the precursors to recorded thought, administrative ledgers, and even the occasional grocery list. Yet these particular tablets bear symbols entirely unfamiliar, defying translation even under the scrutiny of advanced imaging and AI-assisted pattern analysis. Historians still argue whether these marks represent a form of proto-writing, coded ritual instructions, or even an elaborate form of playful artistry meant for no audience but the original scribes. The texture of the tablets is surprisingly smooth, almost slick to the touch, as though a natural polish or chemical reaction left the clay glassy without fire. You trace the spiral on one tablet with your fingertip, and notice tiny indentations that catch the light like scattered droplets of dew. Fringe theorists speculate, just quietly, that these could be instructions from visitors long before conventional civilization, a sort of ancient, how-to manual no one has yet decoded. Some even suggest the symbols encode astronomical cycles, agricultural practices, or encoded dreams. It's peculiar, and you can feel your eyelids droop just imagining the effort ancient scribes expended, scraping and pressing soft clay in endless desert heat. Nearby, the sand shifts slightly underfoot, revealing more tablets stacked like forgotten letters. The inscriptions, while inscrutable, seem intentional. Deliberate spacing, repeated motifs, sequences that hint at a rhythm or cadence. You imagine the scribe's hands small and precise, moving in deliberate strokes, the sound of the stylus scratching, a sound you can almost hear now if you quiet your mind. Some of these tablets bear faint impressions resembling fingerprints, giving you a brief, intimate connection to someone who lived thousands of years before your time. Perhaps they were counting days, chronicling rainfall, or simply doodling during a long afternoon of exile in the sands. It's remarkable how ordinary this discovery feels, even while it flouts understanding. You kneel, brushing sand from a tablet to reveal an unexpected curvature in the symbols, a series of loops that form a pattern reminiscent of water ripples. The imagery is subtle, gentle, and repetitive, almost hypnotic. You can see why some scholars suggest these might not have been practical records at all but ceremonial or meditative tools, maybe used to focus the mind before sleep or during long desert vigils. Your fingers hover over the surface, feeling grooves that seem to hum faintly when you tilt the stone, a tactile whisper of the ancient past. Despite their mystery, there's a rhythm here that lulls you, a quiet cadence in the symbols, the soft rustle of sand, the gentle sway of desert heat waves. You imagine the scribe pausing, wiping their brow, maybe sighing with satisfaction at a completed line. Could these strange desert tablets have been part of a broader network of knowledge shared among distant nomadic tribes, or were they personal, private meditations cast into clay? Historians still argue whether such isolated finds indicate an entire unknown civilization or a single eccentric mind. Either way, there's a peculiar comfort in the unresolved puzzle, a lullaby of curiosity and timelessness that eases you deeper into thought. By the time you finally sit back and stare at the horizon, the tablets seem almost to shimmer, not with magic, but with the quiet insistence of memory. The sun slides lower, casting long, sleepy shadows over the sand, and you feel that gentle, absurd thrill of being utterly, deliciously irrelevant in the grand sweep of human history. There's no rush here, only the slow, careful unfolding of a story written in symbols no one can fully read, and the subtle, strange pleasure of touching something older than cities, older than kingdoms, yet as delicate as a whispered secret. You tuck the thought into your mind like a tiny talisman before letting it drift into the soft haze of imagination, your senses humming with sand, wind, and the rhythm of forgotten hands. The wind is colder here, brushing against your cheeks as you approach the edge of the permafrost, a landscape that seems frozen in both time and sound. You trudge carefully across the uneven ice, boots crunching in rhythm with your own heartbeat, and you spot the first hints of something colossal poking from the frost. Massive figurines, partially thawed, their surfaces smooth, unnervingly symmetrical. Some stand taller than you, carved with intricate patterns that suggest the hands of a meticulous craftsman, or perhaps multiple generations of them. You probably won't survive imagining the patience it took to make one of these giants if you had only your modern attention span. But then again, patience seems like a relative concept in Ice Age terms. So before you get completely entranced, remember to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know your location and the local time. I want to picture you here with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's frozen journey together. These Ice Age figurines are unlike anything mainstream archaeology has cataloged. Sure, the Venus figurines of Europe, those small, handheld carvings of women, often emphasizing fertility, are familiar. You may have handled a replica once in a museum, traced the curves, felt the weight of prehistoric hands. But these frozen giants tower over those tiny statuettes, their scale entirely unprecedented, and their symmetry is almost unnerving. Every limb, every angle seems precise, as if someone measured not only with hands, but with an unseen geometric standard. Scholars still argue whether these were ceremonial icons, representations of gods or ancestors, or some entirely lost form of public art. The texture of the frost is peculiar. It clings to the figurines like a crystalline veil, glittering softly as sunlight pierces the ice. You brush it away gently, revealing the rich detail of carved faces, elongated limbs, and patterned attire. Fringe theories, softly whispered among certain circles of enthusiasts, suggest these could be evidence of forgotten, advanced civilizations or even visitors from elsewhere, though most mainstream historians shake their heads. Still, the precision is captivating. You run a gloved hand along one thigh and notice the subtle asymmetry in the engravings, deliberate perhaps, or maybe a quirk of the material. Nearby, the ground reveals traces of wooden scaffolding, now brittle from centuries of cold. It suggests the figurines were not merely placed but actively constructed, assembled with a care that seems almost obsessive. You imagine the builders pausing to admire their work, breathing in the sharp, icy air, fingers numb from frost yet steady. And there's something hypnotic about it. The slow, deliberate choreography of human effort frozen mid-step, like watching time itself held hostage by ice. What's more puzzling is that the symmetry doesn't correspond to any known Ice Age aesthetic conventions. Some figurines are mirrored precisely, as if guided by tools we can't yet recognize. Others have abstract motifs that recall later civilizations thousands of years ahead. You find yourself whispering to the largest figure, imagining its silent vigil, and you wonder how many more are still buried beneath frost that will not yield for decades, centuries even. Historians still argue whether this is simply an elaborate regional art tradition or an enigmatic expression of mathematical or astronomical knowledge, now trapped in ice. As the sun dips lower, the frozen giants take on a different personality. Shadows lengthen, contours soften, and you realize you are witnessing a moment both ancient and intimately quiet. There's a sense of reverence here, the kind that makes your thoughts slow, your heartbeat align with the crunch of ice beneath your boots, and your mind float in the gentle absurdity of contemplating beings made of snow, stone, and human hands. The wind sighs, carrying faint echoes of a long-gone era, and you can almost hear the laughter or song of those who carved these figures, now silenced by time, yet whispering insistently to anyone patient enough to notice. The subtle thrill, the hypnotic symmetry, and the icy serenity lull you into a quiet meditation. You imagine tracing the carvings again, the cold biting lightly at your skin, each stroke of detail inviting reflection rather than rush. Could these frozen giants have been guardians, markers, or simply monumental art? Historians still argue, and in that argument lies a gentle invitation to let go of certainty and simply enjoy the slow revelation of the past. By the time you turn away, the figures shimmer faintly in the fading light, and you carry with you the exquisite strangeness of Ice Age ingenuity, a lullaby of frost, shadow, and human creativity. You find yourself at the base of a gentle hill, where the grass seems ordinary at first glance, waving softly in the evening breeze. Yet beneath your feet, scanners hum quietly, revealing a hidden world. A network of subterranean chambers sprawls below, twisting and turning like a labyrinth designed to confound the casual explorer, or perhaps the occasional curious archaeologist. The smell is faintly earthy, a mix of soil, stone, and that faint hint of mineral dampness, and your boots sink slightly with each step toward the nearest opening. You probably won't survive imagining what's hidden down here if you're not a fan of cool, musty air and faint echoes, but that's part of tonight's appeal. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you haven't yet, post your location and local time. I like to picture all of you alongside me in these quiet explorations. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into this underground adventure together. Mainstream archaeology tells us that subterranean chambers are often utilitarian storage rooms, defensive hideouts, or burial complexes. Yet this network challenges those assumptions. The hallways twist at angles that seem deliberately disorienting, and some chambers are vast, far beyond any functional need. Columns rise from the floor like frozen trees, etched with strange symbols. Fringe researchers suggest these might have been ritual spaces or even early observatories, their alignment hinting at celestial events rather than practical use. Historians still argue whether the complex was designed by a single community over centuries or reflects layers of construction by successive cultures. As you descend into the first chamber, the light from your torch flickers across smooth stone walls. The temperature drops slightly, and the faint echo of dripping water makes the space feel alive. On one wall, you notice carvings that resemble nothing you've seen before, lines forming intricate patterns, almost like a code yet woven seamlessly into the architecture itself. You run your fingers lightly across them, feeling tiny ridges that have survived centuries, and for a moment, you imagine the hands that carved them. Maybe it was a solitary artisan with too much time on their hands, or a community working in concert, chanting as each mark was laid down. In one corner, a pile of stones appears haphazard at first, but as you look closer, you see deliberate placement. Tiny grooves that might have served to hold objects, or perhaps guided light in certain directions. You crouch, tracing the patterns with your fingertips, and notice faint residues, traces of pigments long faded into the stone. Fringe theorists suggest these pigments could indicate ceremonial use, or even serve as a primitive form of mnemonic device. You imagine rituals conducted in low candlelight, shadows flickering across walls, and the quiet murmur of prayers or instructions that have since vanished from memory. The chambers themselves are acoustically peculiar. Stand in the center of the largest room, and a whispered word echoes, perfectly amplified, as though the architecture itself is listening. Historians still argue whether such acoustic design was intentional or a fortuitous byproduct of construction, but the effect is hypnotic. You murmur a word, and the echo stretches, slow and soft, wrapping around you like a gentle lullaby. It's the kind of detail that keeps archaeologists awake at night, puzzling over purpose while you conveniently are drifting in half-dreamed meditation. Walking further, you come across narrow tunnels barely tall enough to walk through. The walls here are carved with a consistent hand, grooves running in repeating, patterned sequences. Could these have been markers, messages, or directions for travelers long gone? Historians still argue whether the tunnels were for ceremonial procession, emergency escape, or perhaps secret communication. You crouch low, running your hand along the rough stone, imagining generations who may have moved through these passages, whispering, counting steps, or simply marveling at the cool, dark quiet. By the time you reach the end of the main corridor, the chambers open into a vast subterranean hall. A faint shimmer of light from an unknown source casts long, slow shadows that make every column appear taller than it should. The air is still, and you feel a gentle calm seep into your bones. Here, in this hidden world, the past hums quietly, almost audibly, in the echo of your own breath, the creak of stone settling, and the slow rhythm of your heartbeat. And while the purpose of these chambers remains elusive, there is a soothing, almost meditative quality to their existence, a reminder that human ingenuity, patience, and mystery can coexist in perfect, silent harmony. You crouch beside a shallow trench, the sun now dipping behind distant hills, casting long, sleepy shadows across the excavation site. Bones lie scattered in the soft earth, some half exposed, some still encased in hardened soil. At first glance, they resemble any other human remains unearthed across archaeological digs, femurs, ribs, and fragments of skulls. But as you lean closer, brushing the dirt away with careful fingertips, a peculiar dissonance begins to emerge. These skeletons do not quite fit. Their proportions are subtly, but unmistakably, different from any known human lineage. You probably won't survive imagining the initial shock of the archaeologists who first stumbled upon them, but thankfully, you only need your imagination for tonight. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And remember to post your location and local time. I like picturing you here alongside me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the quiet contemplation of these curious bones. Mainstream anthropologists have cataloged countless human remains, noting distinctions between Neanderthals, Denisovans, and anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Yet these new skeletal finds challenge classification entirely. Some bones show elongated limb ratios, unusually broad rib cages, or cranial shapes that do not correspond to any known species. You run your fingers along the smooth surface of a femur, noting a subtle curvature that hints at movement patterns, unlike any human culture we know. Historians still argue whether these represent a previously undiscovered branch of Homo sapiens, a hybrid lineage, or an entirely separate species entirely lost to time. The soil smells faintly of iron, mingling with the soft scent of decaying leaves from above. You imagine the quiet life of these individuals, whose existence may have left no trace beyond these bones. Fringe theories propose that they were remnants of a population displaced by climate shifts, or even lost giants, a notion that tickles your curiosity without stretching into fantasy too far. There's an almost hypnotic rhythm to the way the bones are laid out, as if some unseen hand had arranged them deliberately, a natural pattern or ritualized deposition. You notice tiny incisions on a few ribs, delicate, precise, not violent, but perhaps symbolic or ceremonial, something lost in translation over millennia. Nearby, a skull rests slightly tilted, eye sockets catching the last light like hollow lanterns. Its shape is unfamiliar yet oddly familiar, triggering a quiet shiver of recognition. You trace a gentle curve along the jawline, noting a subtle symmetry almost too perfect for natural variation. Scholars are intrigued. Some suggest evolutionary experimentation, a population adapting to extreme environmental conditions, while others posit something far stranger, hinting at migrations or isolated development outside mainstream evolutionary pathways. Historians still argue whether the skeletal anomalies indicate intentional selection, genetic mutation, or simply a statistical outlier amplified by preservation bias. The site is strangely serene, filled with the faint rustle of wind through nearby grasses. You crouch longer, letting your mind wander through centuries of quiet life, imagining children learning to walk on these unusual limbs, elders teaching hunting or gathering in a rhythm dictated by the land, a life both alien and intimately human. You can almost hear faint laughter carried by the wind, and you feel an odd kinship with these long vanished souls. As darkness falls, the skeletal remains take on a softer, almost meditative quality. You imagine archaeologists years from now uncovering these same bones, pondering the same questions you now whisper quietly to yourself. There's a gentle magic in the uncertainty, a lullaby of curiosity that allows your mind to drift among the anomalies without seeking immediate answers. Could these be evidence of a forgotten lineage, an evolutionary experiment, or something else entirely? Historians still argue, and in that unresolved tension, there is a strangely comforting rhythm, a reminder that the world is vast, mysterious, and delightfully unhurried. The ground crunches softly beneath your boots as you step into the clearing, where the remnants of a structure stretch before you. At first, it seems like any ordinary ruin, a collection of stones arranged in the rough outline of ancient dwellings. But as you approach, the sun glints off the surfaces in a way that makes your eyes narrow in curiosity. The stone floors appear melted, as if some unimaginable heat had flowed over them, fusing them into smooth, glassy plains. You probably won't survive pondering what could have generated such heat in prehistoric times, but for now, it's enough to let your imagination wander. So, before you sink fully into the scene, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to leave your location and local time. I like picturing all of you quietly sharing this strange moment. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's step lightly across these unusual floors. Mainstream archaeology recognizes vitrified floors in a few rare locations, mostly in Iron Age fortresses where intense fires, sometimes accidental, sometimes deliberate, left stone walls partially melted. But here the effect is far more precise and far-reaching, spanning an entire settlement rather than a single hearth. Historians still argue whether this was the result of extreme meteorological events, experimental metallurgy, or some forgotten ceremonial practice. Your fingers hover over the smooth surface, tracing faint ripple like patterns that resemble cooling lava, and you feel a strange mix of awe and unease. As you wander across the site, you notice the stone's edges are crisp and angular, not warped or cracked by the heat, as you might expect. It's almost as though the material itself was designed to withstand this intense energy. Fringe researchers speculate, quietly, of course, that this could indicate knowledge of pyrotechnics lost to time, or perhaps the use of materials with properties we do not yet understand. You imagine the original builders cautiously testing their methods, marveling as the stones glow, then harden again, leaving behind a surface both alien and beautiful. Nearby, scattered fragments of pottery glint faintly, partially melted along one side. The shapes suggest normal domestic use, bowls and storage jars, yet the edges curve unnaturally, as if the heat that flowed through them followed a mysterious logic. You lean closer, brushing away debris, and notice faint streaks of mineral deposits that refract light, making the shards shimmer with an almost ethereal glow. Historians still argue whether such features are intentional, ceremonial, or purely accidental, but the effect is mesmerizing. You pause at what seems to be the center of the site. A circular area, slightly depressed, radiates an energy that is more tactile than visible. Run your hand along the floor, and the glassy surface feels oddly warm, despite the chill creeping into the evening air. Fringe theories suggest ancient rituals involving controlled heat or unknown energy sources, perhaps even early experiments with proto-metallic techniques. Whatever the truth, the space exudes a quiet gravity, like a heartbeat echoing from the past. Looking outward, you notice the surrounding walls are cracked but unscathed by fire, emphasizing that the extreme heat affected only the floor. You kneel, imagining how the community lived atop this strange surface, walking barefoot or in soft sandals, carrying out ordinary tasks with extraordinary infrastructure beneath their feet. Historians still argue whether this represents an isolated experiment, a ceremonial design, or evidence of technological knowledge far beyond what we associate with the period. As twilight deepens, the melted floors shimmer in fading light, and the site hums with a silent rhythm. It's easy to close your eyes for a moment, letting your imagination wander across the past, children running along the edges, elders observing the glow with solemn curiosity, the hush of a community alive yet intimately connected to forces we may never fully comprehend. There's a hypnotic beauty here, a lullaby of heat, stone, and mystery that invites you to slow your thoughts, exhale, and drift alongside the enduring secrets of human ingenuity. The soft crunch of dirt underfoot accompanies your careful steps as you wander through what looks like a discarded midden, a heap of broken pottery shards, fragments of clay vessels, and the faint echo of centuries past. But these aren't ordinary shards. You pick one up, noticing the layered etch marks, almost imperceptible at first, and as your eyes adjust, you realize these scratches seem to form patterns, like tiny grooves ready to resonate with sound. You probably won't survive imagining what sort of acoustic mysteries these shards held for their creators, but for now, simply let yourself wonder. So, before your curiosity fully settles in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you wandering through history beside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's listen closely to the subtle whispers of these ancient ceramics. Mainstream archaeology recognizes that pottery was not only utilitarian but also artistic, often carrying decorative motifs or inscriptions. Yet here, the etched lines appear almost functional in a different sense. When lightly struck, or when wind passes over them in certain ways, the shards emit faint tones, producing a delicate, unpredictable symphony. Historians still argue whether these markings were meant for communication, ritual, or purely aesthetic experimentation. You run your finger along the grooves, feeling the rhythm of human intention preserved in clay, a tactile melody echoing across millennia. The shards seem to vary in thickness and curvature, suggesting that some may have acted as resonators or primitive instruments. Fringe theorists, quietly, speculate that these fragments could represent one of the earliest forms of recorded sound, a playful or ceremonial precursor to music notation. You imagine a child picking up a shard, tapping it lightly against another, listening intently as a low hum emerges, and perhaps parents or elders smiling knowingly at the tiny musician. There's something mesmerizing about the concept. That sound could be encoded in clay long before string or wind instruments were perfected. Nearby, a larger fragment catches your attention. It is subtly concave, almost like a shallow bowl etched with parallel lines that curve delicately. When you tilt it toward a gentle breeze, it vibrates faintly, a whisper of wind amplified into an audible note. You kneel, experimenting with different angles, letting the sound ripple through the clearing. Historians still argue whether these acoustical properties were accidental, an unintended byproduct of clay shaping, or the result of deliberate experimentation by artisans who understood resonance in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. As you wander further, you notice shards with tiny painted motifs. Birds, rivers, and abstract patterns decorate their surfaces, each aligned with the grooves in ways that suggest they are more than mere decoration. Perhaps the etchings acted as visual guides for musical performance, or perhaps they held symbolic meaning for ceremonies. You feel a quiet thrill imagining the original holders of these shards, their fingers tracing patterns while soft music floated through the evening air. Fringe speculation posits that some cultures may have considered these sound-producing shards sacred, a medium to communicate with unseen forces or ancestors. The ambient light fades and shadows stretch across the site. You sit, gathering a few shards, and tap them lightly, letting the gentle tones blend into the whisper of wind and rustling leaves. There's an almost hypnotic rhythm here, a lullaby of human creativity, patience, and playful curiosity. The shards remind you that history is not always monumental. Sometimes it hums quietly in small details, in layered grooves, in subtle sounds preserved across centuries. And in that hum, there is a strange comfort, a soft invitation to slow your thoughts, to linger a little longer, and to let the past drift gently into your imagination. You step carefully along uneven ground, the late afternoon sun painting long, lazy streaks across the ruins of an ancient village. At first glance, it seems like any other settlement left to time. Low walls, sun-bleached stones, the occasional fragment of pottery poking through the grass. But as you wander deeper, a remarkable pattern emerges. Each building, each street, aligns almost perfectly with distant stars, the constellations that once danced across the night sky for inhabitants long gone. You probably won't survive imagining the meticulous astronomical knowledge required to construct such a village, but it's strangely soothing to consider. So, before you settle fully into the scene, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you tracing the constellations with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift along these sky-aligned streets. Mainstream historians have long noted that ancient civilizations often used the stars for navigation and ritual calendars. The Egyptians, for instance, oriented their temples and pyramids with uncanny precision to certain celestial bodies. Yet this village goes further. Entire streets, homes, and communal spaces are meticulously positioned according to star charts that no modern observer can fully decode. Historians still argue whether these layouts were primarily practical, ceremonial, or both. You trace the line of a street with your fingers, imagining the builders aligning stones with nothing but poles, ropes, and the patient observation of the heavens. The materials are simple, sun-baked mud bricks, local stone, but the execution is extraordinary. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that such precision could imply early knowledge of astronomy far beyond what is generally credited to the era. You crouch near one building and notice a series of small pits in the ground that seem to mirror the positions of particular stars. Could these have been primitive observatories or markers for agricultural cycles? The possibilities stretch quietly in your mind like constellations themselves, and the uncertainty is oddly comforting. As you wander, the village seems alive despite its abandonment. Imagine residents moving through narrow alleys at dusk, their eyes lifted skyward, aligning their daily activities with celestial rhythms. Historians still argue whether these alignments were meant for religious ceremonies, social organization, or simple aesthetic pleasure. You pause at what appears to be a central plaza, noting that it too aligns with a set of stars invisible to the naked eye today, shifted by millennia of axial precession. The alignment is gentle, precise, almost meditative, creating a subtle harmony between earth and sky that seems to slow your heartbeat. Nearby, small altars and shrines pepper the streets, each subtly oriented, each whispering a connection to unseen patterns above. Fringe observers suggest these could have been used to track time or to signal seasonal changes crucial for planting and harvesting. You trace your fingers across worn carvings, imagining the quiet devotion that went into each gesture, each careful placement. The village feels almost alive in its precision, as though it were breathing in rhythm with the night sky itself, a silent lullaby orchestrated in stone and star. The sun dips lower, casting gentle shadows across streets perfectly aligned with long-forgotten constellations. You take a deep breath, letting the serene geometry sink into your thoughts. Walking among these houses, you feel an intimate connection with those who lived here, their patience, their curiosity, their quiet reverence for the night sky. There's a subtle humor in imagining them noticing you now, wandering their streets centuries later, equally awed and bewildered. Historians still argue whether these alignments were a form of practical knowledge, spiritual expression, or a playful meditation on cosmic order. Regardless, the village hums with calm, rhythmic energy, inviting you to slow your thoughts, drift along its quiet streets, and let the celestial patterns lull you into a gentle reverie. You crouch beside a smooth, pale stone, brushing away loose soil to reveal the faint edge of a tool unlike any you've encountered before. At first, it appears ordinary, a simple hand axe or scraper, but as you trace its surface, the mineral composition makes your brow furrow. This stone, used for cutting and carving, originates from a quarry hundreds of miles away, a source no known group in this region had access to. You probably won't survive imagining how ancient peoples transported these heavy, awkward rocks across harsh terrain, but the mystery invites a quiet curiosity. So, before you let your mind wander too far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and post your location and local time so I can picture you here alongside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's trace the journey of these remarkable stones. Mainstream archaeology recognizes that long-distance trade networks existed even in prehistory. Obsidian from specific volcanic regions, for example, has been found hundreds of miles from its source, indicating extensive exchange. Yet these tools push the boundaries of what we thought possible. Their mineral composition, granite fused with an unusual iron, rich crystal, has no local match, and no trace of the quarry has been discovered. Historians still argue whether these tools were moved deliberately along established trade routes or carried as part of migratory lifestyles by a single, resourceful group. The workmanship is impeccable. Edges are razor sharp, smoothed in a way suggesting repeated honing with techniques not documented for this period. Fringe theorists quietly propose that these tools might indicate lost knowledge of stone, working, or advanced material techniques, almost a prelude to metallurgy and precision. You run a gloved hand along a cutting edge, marveling at the symmetry, imagining the patience required to craft it, the long afternoons and the soft abrasion of sand or other stone materials used as polish. Nearby, a cluster of similar tools lies arranged in what seems like deliberate order. Perhaps they were left as offerings, or maybe simply stored with meticulous care. You notice faint scratches on one, seemingly unrelated to wear, perhaps even intentional markings, a coded signature of the maker. Historians still argue whether these scratches were functional, ceremonial, or a form of identification lost to time. You imagine the artisan standing quietly at sunset, checking each edge, satisfied with their work, unaware that millennia later, someone like you would be crouching here, tracing their careful strokes. The landscape itself whispers a quiet tale. Rolling hills stretch toward distant mountains, perhaps marking the route these tools traveled, or serving as landmarks in a vast, open world. Fringe speculation suggests these items might have been transported with knowledge of hidden passes or seasonal rivers, a prehistoric GPS of sorts. You pause to imagine the travelers hauling these heavy stones over rough terrain, resting in the shade of sparse trees, the occasional river crossing leaving damp footprints in mud that have long since vanished. The sun dips lower, casting elongated shadows that reach across the tools, highlighting their craftsmanship. You sit brushing away a little more soil, letting your eyes linger on the perfect symmetry. There's a gentle rhythm here, the work of human hands, the mystery of distant origins, the faint echo of journeys that spanned vast landscapes. Historians still argue whether this indicates a lost trading network, an isolated master artisan, or simply a quirk of survival and necessity. And as you let your gaze drift over the tools, you feel a comforting calm, a lullaby of human ingenuity and the enduring, slow passage of time. You wander along a narrow ridge, the wind soft against your face, carrying the faint metallic scent of copper from centuries, old veins that once fed human ambition. Below, an intricate network of paths snakes across the hills, their faint traces now barely visible in the grass. These are the remnants of an ancient copper trade route, stretching across valleys, rivers, and foothills. You probably won't survive imagining the backbreaking labor of hauling heavy ingots over such terrain, yet it's strangely calming to picture the slow rhythm of footsteps echoing across centuries. So, before you drift too deeply into this vision, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And share your location and local time. It's comforting to imagine you tracing these silent pathways with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's follow the quiet journey of the copper. Mainstream historians understand that copper was one of humanity's earliest metals, essential for tools, ornaments, and trade. Archaeological evidence shows well-established networks spanning hundreds of kilometers, yet this particular route is unusual. It abruptly ends in the middle of nowhere, leaving no clear settlement or forge at its terminus. Historians still argue whether the path was abandoned due to environmental changes, social upheaval, or some inexplicable cultural shift. You run your fingers along a worn stone marking the trail, imagining the travelers who once counted their steps, the weight of metal pressing against their shoulders. The road itself is meticulously graded, hugging ridges to avoid floods and winding along gentle inclines, suggesting intimate knowledge of the landscape. Fringe theories hint at a lost civilization capable of planning long-range logistics beyond what we usually credit to early societies. You picture caravans of donkeys or humans trudging in a slow, almost meditative rhythm, copper ingots clinking softly like a subtle percussion accompanying the wind. Small outposts appear along the path, their stone foundations faint but detectable. You crouch to examine one, noticing residues of smelting and faint charcoal marks. Historians still argue whether these were temporary shelters for travelers, ceremonial stations, or small production sites. Some tools nearby hint at ongoing maintenance, polishing the copper, reshaping ingots, or marking ownership in ways lost to time. You imagine craftsmen carefully tapping and filing the metal, each strike sending a faint echo across the ridge, a lullaby of labor that has traveled into your imagination. The sudden termination of the route deepens the mystery. The landscape drops sharply into a wide plain, devoid of settlements. Fringe speculation suggests natural disaster, territorial conflict, or perhaps trade routes shifting to meet unknown economic pressures. You trace the paths with your fingers in the dirt, imagining traders halting mid-journey, perhaps leaving ingots behind, the quiet sound of wind over metal the only record of their effort. As the sun sinks lower, the ridge glows with a gentle golden light, casting long, sleepy shadows over the copper paths. You linger in the calm, picturing the slow, deliberate footsteps that once traversed these trails, the rhythm of human effort, and the quiet determination etched into the land itself. There's a strange, comforting meditation in imagining that effort, the sound of copper clinking, the soft rustle of fabric and footsteps, and the endless patience required to maintain a network spanning valleys and hills. Historians still argue why it ends so abruptly, and perhaps the ambiguity is what makes the memory linger so pleasantly, a lullaby of metal, motion, and enduring mystery. You step lightly across a field strewn with the ruins of once thriving structures, the fading light casting gentle shadows that stretch like lazy fingers over the ground. At first, the bricks look ordinary, mud and clay hardened into rectangular forms, but as you approach, a subtle luminescence catches your eye. These bricks glow faintly in darkness, emitting a soft, almost imperceptible light that seems to pulse with a quiet rhythm. You probably won't survive imagining the alchemy or accident that could cause such bricks to emit a glow, but it's hypnotically soothing to consider. So, before you linger too long under their soft shimmer, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And share your location and local time. I like picturing you quietly watching alongside me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore the subtle magic of these luminous ruins. Mainstream archaeology often interprets bricks as practical construction materials, used for homes, walls, and communal buildings. Yet these faintly glowing bricks defy expectations. Their luminescence is unlike any chemical reaction typical for the era, and their consistency suggests deliberate formulation rather than accidental mineral presence. Historians still argue whether the glow is a result of natural phosphorescent minerals, an early experimentation with chemical compounds, or a ceremonial enhancement meant to be observed in low light. You gently press a fingertip against one brick, feeling the cool surface, and marvel at how subtly it hums with quiet energy. The bricks are arranged with geometric precision, forming walls and enclosures that suggest planned layouts, not haphazard construction. Fringe theories suggest they might have served as guiding lights, perhaps in nocturnal rituals or as markers to navigate the settlement after dark. You imagine inhabitants walking among the softly glowing walls, their steps muffled on the earthen floors, shadows dancing gently across luminescent surfaces. A quiet, hypnotic spectacle that seems perfectly suited for reflection or meditation. Nearby, fragments of mortar shimmer faintly, too, hinting at a deliberate inclusion of luminescent minerals in the construction process. You crouch, examining the subtle variations in glow between bricks and corners, noticing patterns that could indicate symbolic intention rather than mere decoration. Historians still argue whether this was practical, aesthetic, or ritualistic, but the soft, ghostly light has a calming effect regardless. You wander to a collapsed corner of the structure and notice brick edges fused together with mineral deposits that enhance their glow. Fringe speculation suggests early experimentation with light, harnessing techniques, primitive yet sophisticated in effect. You can almost hear the low hum of energy, or perhaps that's just your imagination, but either way, the effect is mesmerizing. It's easy to picture children playing near these walls, elders walking slowly, and artisans observing the subtle shimmer, letting the soft light guide their movements in quiet contemplation. As darkness envelops the surrounding landscape, the brick's glow becomes more pronounced, a gentle heartbeat across the ruins. You linger, imagining the quiet life of the settlement, its inhabitants moving with measured grace under luminescent walls. The air feels warmer here, almost charged with the memory of centuries past, the soft hum of the glowing bricks resonating in your mind. Historians still argue whether this glow was accidental or intentional, but the ambiguity allows you to drift, imagining the lullabies of light, the slow rhythm of human curiosity, and the serene persistence of an ancient craft lost to time. You kneel on the soft, sandy soil near a coastal excavation, the gentle sound of waves lapping not far from your ears. Scattered around you are shells, some ordinary, some carved with patterns so precise they resemble rudimentary circuits. You probably won't survive imagining why someone would inscribe intricate designs into seashells thousands of years ago, but it's oddly soothing to consider the quiet patience that went into each one. So, before you let your mind wander too far into the mysteries of ancient maritime artistry, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And share your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore these ornate shells together. Mainstream archaeology recognizes that seashells were often used as ornamentation or currency in coastal communities. Yet these particular shells are remarkable, etched in fine, precise patterns reminiscent of circuitry, but they predate any known technological development by millennia. Historians still argue whether the patterns served a functional purpose, a symbolic ritual, or were purely decorative, left by imaginative artisans experimenting with geometry. You hold one in your hand, feeling the gentle curves and grooves, and marvel at the care it must have taken to create something so delicate in such a harsh environment. The shells are all local species, yet some carry designs reminiscent of inland motifs, suggesting either the movement of ideas or the exchange of objects across surprisingly long distances. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that these could represent early proto-engineering knowledge or a symbolic language lost to time. You imagine a craftsman, perched on a rocky outcrop by the shore, etching symbols while the tide ebbs and flows, the rhythm of waves guiding the motion of their hands. As you examine them more closely, you notice that some shells are grouped in patterns that mimic basic circuits, forming loops and connections that suggest intentional sequencing. Historians still argue whether these were meant to represent natural phenomena, social hierarchies, or something else entirely. You run your fingers lightly along one spiral, feeling the indentation smooth beneath your touch, and imagine the creator pausing to admire the tiny perfection, perhaps smiling at their own meticulous work. Nearby, fragments of charcoal and small clay bowls hint that the shells may have been part of ritual or daily practice, possibly used in ceremonies, trade, or teaching. Fringe speculation proposes that some shells were instructional tools, demonstrating simple cause and effect principles through symbolic arrangements. You can almost hear the soft clatter of shells tapping together, the quiet murmur of conversation in a long, gone coastal community, and the faint lull of waves acting as nature's metronome for human creativity. The sight feels serene, the shells scattered but purposeful, creating a subtle rhythm across the sand. You imagine generations handling these objects, arranging and rearranging them, passing them from hand to hand, and marveling at the care invested in such small, unassuming items. Historians still argue whether the designs encode knowledge, storytelling, or spiritual significance, but the ambiguity only deepens the quiet fascination. And as you sit back, letting the soft crash of distant waves and the gentle geometry of the shells sink into your mind, you feel a peaceful rhythm emerge, a gentle, ancient lullaby of the sea, patience, and human imagination. You step lightly into a misty valley, the air damp and fragrant with the scent of moss and wildflowers. At first glance, the stone formations scattered around the area seem natural, weathered outcrops shaped by centuries of wind and rain. But as you move closer, you notice subtle carvings etched into the surface's spirals, concentric circles, and abstract symbols so precise they seem almost mathematical. You probably won't survive imagining how ancient people etched such patterns without modern tools, but the gentle patience embedded in each groove is oddly calming. So, before your mind wanders too far into the mystery, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. I like picturing you wandering quietly with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore the enigmatic stone carvings together. Mainstream archaeologists often interpret carved stones as markers of ritual, astronomical tracking, or territorial claims. Yet these formations don't align with any known celestial patterns or territorial demarcations. Historians still argue whether these engravings served a functional purpose, conveyed symbolic meaning, or were simply aesthetic exercises in patience and design. You trace the edge of a spiral, feeling the subtle grooves under your fingertips, and imagine the steady hands of a carver moving in quiet repetition, marking time and thought onto stone. The formations are scattered across the valley in seemingly random clusters, yet a faint rhythm emerges when you step back, an irregular symmetry, like a visual heartbeat across the landscape. Fringe theories quietly suggest these could represent early abstract mapping, proto-mathematics, or encoded stories passed through generations. You imagine the original artists crouching beside the stones, chiseling slowly, their tools catching faint glimmers of sunlight, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a pattern emerge from raw rock. Nearby, small depressions in the stone seem to hold water after rainfall, catching reflections of the sky above. You peer into one, noticing that the carvings distort and refract the reflection, creating shapes that appear almost alive, twisting gently with the breeze. Historians still argue whether these intentional optical effects played a role in ritual, meditation, or teaching, or whether they are a serendipitous byproduct of erosion and carving techniques. You wander through the valley, letting your gaze move from one formation to the next, noticing slight variations in depth, orientation, and motif. Some stones have faint pigmentation, traces of red and ochre, suggesting ceremonial embellishment. Fringe theorists propose these pigments were part of seasonal or lunar rituals, perhaps enhancing the stone's visual impact under certain light conditions. You imagine quiet ceremonies, people moving slowly among the stones at dawn, the mist curling around their legs, and the valley alive with subtle reverence. As twilight settles, shadows deepen, and the valley becomes almost dreamlike. The carvings catch the last light, faintly glowing with reflected amber hues. You sit on a flat stone, fingers tracing grooves, feeling a rhythmic calm as your eyes wander across the undulating landscape of patterned rock. Historians still argue whether these stones served practical, spiritual, or aesthetic purposes, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to drift lazily through centuries. There's a gentle music in the rhythm of the carvings, the soft whisper of mist, and the patience of human hands long gone, inviting you to slow your breathing and drift along a quiet river of time. You step carefully along the edge of a dense forest, where sunlight filters through the thick canopy in lazy, golden beams. Fallen leaves crunch softly underfoot, mingling with the faint smell of damp earth and moss. At first, it seems like an ordinary woodland, yet scattered among the trees are large, flat stones arranged in intricate geometric patterns, triangles, hexagons, and spirals, almost like a giant, forgotten puzzle spread across the forest floor. You probably won't survive imagining how these stones were transported and positioned with such precision centuries ago, but the quiet deliberation is oddly soothing. So before your mind wanders too far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And share your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you exploring the forest with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's wander gently through this woodland mystery. Mainstream archaeology often interprets arranged stones as markers of ceremonial spaces or burial grounds. Yet this forest patterning is peculiar. The geometric arrangements span several acres and show no alignment with known celestial or magnetic markers. Historians still argue whether the placement was purely symbolic, functional, or part of an elaborate game or teaching tool. You kneel beside a triangular formation, brushing away moss and debris, imagining hands carefully lifting and placing each stone with patient precision. The stones themselves are unusually smooth, polished in a way that suggests repeated handling. Fringe theorists speculate that the arrangement could be part of a ritual landscape designed to teach geometry or physics through tactile experience. You run your fingers along a hexagon, feeling the subtle, deliberate indentation, and imagine a teacher centuries ago guiding students to trace patterns, learning through touch in an outdoor classroom of sorts. Small depressions in some stones hint at ritual or practical use. They could have held offerings, water, or even simple markers for counting days or seasons. Historians still argue whether the stones were part of daily life, ceremonial practice, or some other unknown purpose entirely. You trace a spiral formation, imagining people moving slowly along its curves, following an invisible choreography, a quiet, meditative dance left for centuries for us to rediscover. Nearby, a faintly carved path connects several clusters of stones, worn by countless footsteps long vanished. Fringe observers suggest this path might mirror natural or astronomical cycles, subtly integrating the environment into human practice. You step along the worn route, letting your imagination fill in the gentle hum of activity, people pausing to observe patterns, marking seasons, or engaging in ritual play. There's a meditative quality in the regularity and quiet precision, as though the forest itself has become a slow, breathing classroom. As the forest grows darker, the shapes of the stones blur slightly in dim light, creating a sense of infinite repetition and calm. You sit on a smooth boulder, letting your fingers trace the edges of triangles and spirals, feeling the rhythm of centuries beneath your touch. Historians still argue over purpose, but the ambiguity allows your mind to wander freely, imagining ritual, instruction, or silent games played by long-gone hands. In the hush of the forest, the stones seem to hum softly, a lullaby of geometry, patience, and human creativity waiting quietly for curious minds to rediscover. You step gingerly into a shallow valley where the earth is peppered with small, metallic nodules, their surfaces glinting faintly in the late afternoon sun. At first, they look like ordinary mineral deposits, yet as you crouch closer, you notice subtle carvings etched onto each nugget, lines, dots, and tiny geometric shapes that seem to follow no immediately recognizable pattern. You probably won't survive imagining the patience required to inscribe metal with primitive tools thousands of years ago, but the meditative rhythm of the process is strangely comforting. So, before your mind drifts too far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to post your location and local time. I like picturing you here beside me, examining these curious objects. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore these mysterious metal nodules together. Mainstream archaeologists understand that metalworking was central to early societies, both for practical tools and decorative items. Yet these nodules defy conventional classification. They appear to have been partially smelted, yet some retain a crystalline structure suggesting they were never fully melted. Historians still argue whether these were experimental alloys, failed casting attempts, or intentionally preserved in this state for symbolic or ritual purposes. You run your fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the tiny grooves etched with precision, imagining a craftsman crouched for hours, gently scraping patterns into the hard metal with care. Some nodules are arranged in faintly concentric circles, almost like maps or markers of a larger, unseen structure. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that these clusters may have been used for astronomical tracking, ceremonial display, or even a primitive counting system. You imagine someone placing each nodule with deliberate intention, their hands steady, breath measured, the nodules clicking softly against one another as they settle into position. Nearby, traces of charcoal and faint residues of a flux-like material suggest that the metal was heated in small, controlled fires. Historians still argue whether these nodules were purely decorative, used as tokens of trade, or part of metallurgical experimentation lost to history. You imagine a small workshop, smoke curling in thin streams, a craftsman hunched over a stone hearth, carefully heating and carving, each nodule a testament to patience and curiosity. The metallic glint across the valley creates a subtle, hypnotic shimmer as the sun dips lower. You kneel to arrange a few nodules in a pattern, letting your imagination drift into centuries past. Perhaps these were teaching tools, objects of ritual, or quietly experimental prototypes. Fringe speculation suggests they may have been used to calibrate other instruments, or simply to practice delicate engraving techniques. Either way, the repetitive pattern, the faint hum of metal, and the gentle light combine into a soothing rhythm, a slow, quiet melody of human ingenuity preserved in metal. As twilight deepens, the valley's metallic nodules reflect fading light in a muted, golden glow. You sit quietly, tracing the grooves with your fingers, letting the calm pulse of history seep into your thoughts. Historians still argue over function, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to wander, slow and gentle, along the curves and lines of these ancient metals. There's a quiet beauty here, patience, experimentation, and the subtle whisper of long, gone hands guiding the creation of objects meant to endure, even if their purpose remains elusive. You step carefully onto a plateau where the ground is studded with shallow pits, each just large enough to hold a single stone or artifact. At first glance, it seems like ordinary storage or waste heaps, but as your eyes adjust, you notice the pits form an elaborate grid, stretching across the plateau with mathematical precision. You probably won't survive imagining the meticulous labor that went into creating such a pattern without modern tools, but it's oddly calming to picture the slow, deliberate rhythm of hands at work. So, before your mind drifts too far into the geometry of antiquity, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to imagine you here with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's examine these mysterious grids together. Mainstream archaeology often interprets grids as markers of organization, from urban planning to agricultural layouts. Yet this plateau's grid defies straightforward interpretation. The pits are uniform in size but vary subtly in depth and spacing, suggesting an intentional irregularity. Historians still argue whether these grids were functional, ceremonial, or a sophisticated system of information encoding. You kneel beside one pit, running your fingers along its edge, imagining generations of people placing stones, seeds, or offerings with quiet concentration. Inside some pits lie small, polished stones of varying colors. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that the arrangement may have been an ancient computational system, a kind of tactile counting or early calendar. You imagine someone stepping across the plateau, transferring stones from pit to pit, the soft clink of rock against rock forming a gentle rhythm in the air, a quiet meditation on time and order. Nearby, faint carvings on the plateau's edges hint at symbolic meanings, spirals, dots, and lines that mirror the grid's subtle irregularities. Historians still argue whether these were instructional markings, ceremonial symbols, or simply decorative. You trace a spiral with your finger, feeling the smooth indentation and imagining the creator pausing to admire the symmetry, perhaps smiling at the precision achieved through slow, careful labor. The surrounding landscape is peaceful, rolling hills, distant trees, and the gentle rustle of wind through grasses. Fringe theorists suggest that the plateau might have been a teaching ground, a ritual site, or a primitive astronomical observatory, where the placement of stones and pits tracked lunar or solar cycles. You wander slowly across the grid, letting your eyes follow its pattern, imagining people moving in sync with cosmic rhythms, their steps deliberate and unhurried. As evening approaches, shadows stretch across the plateau, softening the geometry into gentle flowing lines. You sit on a flat stone at the edge, fingers tracing the edges of pits, letting the subtle rhythm of the arrangement seep into your mind. Historians still argue about purpose, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to wander freely. There's a soothing cadence here, a lullaby of hands at work, of rhythm and repetition, and of human patience preserved across millennia, quietly waiting for someone to notice and drift along with it. You follow a narrow trail into a hidden canyon, where the walls rise steeply on either side, covered in faint, almost imperceptible engravings. At first glance, they resemble ordinary weathered marks from centuries of erosion, but as you lean closer, the lines resolve into patterned spirals, waves, and sequences that suggest deliberate human design. You probably won't survive imagining the patience it took to carve these symbols directly into stone with primitive tools, but there's a hypnotic calm in tracing them with your eyes. So, before you let your imagination wander too far into the canyon's quiet depths, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here beside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore these enigmatic engravings together. Mainstream archaeology recognizes petroglyphs as markers of ritual storytelling or territorial claims. Yet these engravings are unusual, the lines form repetitive, rhythmic sequences that don't correspond to any known language or iconography. Historians still argue whether the patterns encode information, astronomical observations, or purely symbolic motifs. You run a fingertip lightly over one spiral, imagining a quiet artisan hunched over the stone, patiently carving in rhythm with the fading sun. The canyon walls are slightly concave in places, creating natural acoustics. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that the engravings may have been designed to resonate with sound, amplifying chants, footsteps, or the wind itself. You clap softly, and a faint echo ripples along the curves, as if the canyon itself is joining in a centuries-old melody. Small ledges along the walls hold tiny, polished stones arranged with deliberate spacing. Historians still argue whether these were offerings, measurement tools, or a primitive signaling system. You imagine someone carefully placing each stone, stepping back to observe the overall pattern, perhaps smiling quietly at the symmetry achieved through repetitive care. The light filters softly through the canyon mouth, casting the engravings in gentle relief. Fringe speculation suggests that the canyon may have served as a teaching site, ritual chamber, or observatory, where the combination of visual patterns and natural acoustics guided meditation or learning. You move slowly along the path, letting your eyes follow the sequences, imagining the rhythm of footsteps and hands tracing stone, a quiet choreography repeated across generations. As twilight deepens, the canyon seems to breathe gently with the wind, shadows dancing over the engravings in a slow, mesmerizing cadence. You lean against the stone, fingers tracing familiar spirals and waves, feeling the hypnotic calm of repetition and human intention. Historians still argue about meaning, but the unresolved mystery allows your mind to drift freely. There is a soft lullaby here, patience carved in stone, echoes carried through time, and the serene rhythm of human curiosity preserved quietly for those willing to linger. You step cautiously into a sunken chamber, partially hidden beneath the ruins of what appears to have been a small temple. Dust hangs in the air, illuminated by stray beams of sunlight filtering through cracks in the stone ceiling. At first glance, the chamber seems empty, save for faint markings on the walls and scattered fragments of pottery. But as your eyes adjust, you notice something extraordinary: a series of stone reliefs depicting animals, humans, and abstract shapes, all arranged in a sequential narrative that defies conventional interpretation. You probably won't survive imagining the patience and storytelling instinct of the artisans who carved this tableau, but it's soothing to witness the rhythm of their intent across centuries. So, before you drift fully into this story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly observing alongside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's follow the silent narrative etched in stone. Mainstream archaeologists recognize that stone reliefs often served religious or commemorative purposes. Yet the sequence in this chamber is unusual. Animals and humans appear in poses that suggest movement and interaction, almost cinematic in effect, while abstract shapes interspersed between figures hint at a symbolic code. Historians still argue whether these reliefs were intended purely for storytelling, ritual instruction, or encoded knowledge accessible only to a select few. You run your fingers lightly along the edge of one figure, imagining the slow, precise chiseling required, the soft echo of stone against stone filling the chamber. Some sections of the relief show faint traces of pigment, suggesting that the images were once vividly colored. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that the combination of color, sequence, and abstract symbols might have been an early mnemonic device designed to teach or preserve knowledge visually. You imagine someone guiding a group through the chamber, pointing out details and rhythmically narrating the story, their voice harmonizing with the quiet reverberation of the walls. Nearby, fragments of pottery inlaid with tiny stones hint at offerings or ceremonial objects connected to the reliefs. Historians still argue whether the chamber was actively used for worship, storytelling, or as a secret repository of cultural memory. You kneel to inspect a shard, tracing delicate etchings, imagining artisans placing it carefully after a ritual, the soft scrape of stone or clay a lullaby for attentive participants. The chamber is remarkably still, the faint scent of stone and dust mingling with the cool air that drifts from hidden crevices. Fringe speculation suggests that some reliefs may have aligned with sunlight at particular times of the year, illuminating specific figures to mark seasonal or ritual significance. You sit quietly, imagining the gentle glow highlighting animals or abstract shapes, casting a soft, meditative rhythm across the walls. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen across the reliefs, softening the carved lines into flowing, almost dreamlike shapes. You trace them slowly with your gaze, feeling the patient rhythm of human hands and imagination across time. Historians still debate the exact meaning, but the unresolved mystery invites your mind to wander freely, drifting alongside the silent narrative of the chamber. There's a soothing cadence here, the interplay of art, ritual, and quiet human intention, preserved across centuries, inviting you to slow your thoughts and drift gently into imagination. You tread softly into a grove of ancient trees, their gnarled branches weaving a canopy that filters sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. At first, it seems like any quiet woodland, but scattered among the roots are slender clay tubes, hollow and smooth, some only a few inches long, others approaching the size of a form. You probably won't survive imagining how these delicate tubes survived centuries in damp soil, yet their quiet presence is oddly soothing. So, before your curiosity drifts too far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly examining these artifacts. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore the mystery of these ancient tubes together. Mainstream archaeology often interprets hollow clay artifacts as pipes, musical instruments, or simple tools. Yet these tubes are unusual. Many are perforated with tiny holes, sometimes in irregular patterns, others in sequences that could suggest a rudimentary musical notation or sound coding system. Historians still argue whether the tubes were functional, ritualistic, or perhaps even an early communication device. You pick one up, holding it to your ear and gently tapping it with a finger, hearing a faint, hollow resonance, imagining the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman testing its tone. Some tubes are grouped in clusters, forming linear arrangements or arcs, as if deliberately positioned to interact acoustically or symbolically. Fringe theorists quietly suggest that these could represent early experimental soundscapes, proto-instruments for ceremonies, or teaching tools for rhythm and pitch. You picture a small group of people, crouched in the forest, carefully arranging each tube, testing sounds against the whispering leaves and soft rustle of branches. Nearby, traces of soot and charcoal hint at small fires or heating processes, perhaps to harden the clay or adjust tonal qualities. Historians still argue whether these techniques were purely practical, artistic experimentation, or part of ritual preparation. You imagine the soft crackle of embers, the quiet concentration of hands shaping and testing each tube, a slow, meditative process that leaves a gentle echo in the forest air. The tube's placement among the tree roots seems intentional, almost as if the forest itself was part of the design. Fringe speculation proposes that the arrangement could enhance natural acoustics, using the ground, roots, and surrounding trunks to amplify or alter sound. You walk slowly among the clusters, listening to faint echoes and imagining ritual or educational practices conducted in harmony with the natural surroundings. As twilight descends, shadows lengthen and the forest hushes. You sit on a soft patch of moss holding a cluster of tubes, letting your fingers trace their edges and feeling the delicate rhythm of centuries past. Historians still debate function, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to drift, soft and unhurried, with the gentle resonance of human ingenuity echoing faintly through the forest. There's a quiet lullaby here, patience, experimentation, and the meditative practice of creating sound, preserved silently by time, inviting you to slow your thoughts and float gently through imagination. You wander along a misty riverside, the water lapping gently against moss-covered stones, the air cool and faintly scented with wet earth. At first glance, the riverbank seems ordinary, save for scattered wooden fragments half buried in mud. But as you step closer, you notice intricate carvings on the fragment spirals, wavy lines, and symbols that suggest careful planning rather than random driftwood. You probably won't survive imagining how these delicate carvings endured water, weather, and centuries, but there's a calm fascination in observing them. So, before you drift too deeply into the scene, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly examining the riverside relics. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore the mysteries of these carved wooden fragments together. Mainstream archaeology recognizes carved wood as a medium for practical items, tools, containers, or boats, but these fragments defy conventional categorization. They are too small and delicate for heavy, duty use, yet too intricate for mere decoration. Historians still argue whether they were ritual objects, educational tools, or markers for waterborne travel. You pick up a fragment, feeling the smooth grooves under your fingertips, and imagine the craftsman crouched near the river, hands steady, carving slowly as ripples echo softly around them. Some fragments appear to fit together, forming loose panels or small devices, suggesting a complex assembly no longer intact. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that these may have been early hydrological instruments, measuring water flow or levels, or even part of an encoded communication system for riverside communities. You try fitting two pieces together, imagining the quiet satisfaction of trial and error as the original makers adjusted their designs with patience and care. Nearby, small piles of charcoal and traces of resin indicate that some fragments may have been treated to resist water, a subtle yet sophisticated method of preservation. Historians still argue whether the resin was functional, symbolic, or part of a ritualized craft. You imagine the craftsman gently brushing resin over carved grooves, the faint smell lingering in the damp riverside air, the rhythm of their hands slow and meditative. The river itself seems to interact with the fragments. Placing a piece near the water, you notice that ripples subtly enhance the carved lines, creating a faint, reflective shimmer that transforms the artifact into something almost ethereal. Fringe speculation suggests the makers may have designed the carvings to engage with natural light and movement, merging artistry and environment. You step back, listening to the gentle rush of water, imagining ceremonies, instruction, or quiet contemplation taking place in rhythm with the river's flow. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretch across the riverbank, softening the edges of wood and water alike. You sit on a smooth stone, fingers tracing delicate grooves, letting the gentle rhythm of carving water and time seep into your thoughts. Historians still debate purpose, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to drift freely, slow and unhurried. There is a soothing cadence here, patient hands, water's soft music, and the quiet endurance of creativity preserved by nature, inviting you to float gently alongside it in your mind. You wander into a sun-dappled canyon, the walls towering above and faint streaks of mineral deposits tracing patterns along the stone. At first glance, it seems like a natural formation, but as you step closer, you notice faint engravings that have been carefully filled with a shimmering, ochre-like pigment. You probably won't survive imagining the painstaking effort required to carve and pigment these intricate lines in such a challenging location, but the slow precision is oddly calming. So, before your imagination wanders too far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here beside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore the painted engravings together. Mainstream archaeology often interprets painted rock engravings as ritual or symbolic markers. Yet these pigments and carvings are unusual. The sequences form repeating abstract patterns with subtle variations, suggesting a deliberate system rather than random decoration. Historians still argue whether they conveyed information, commemorated events, or served a meditative function. You run your fingers lightly along the grooves, feeling the faint texture beneath the pigment, and imagine the artisan carefully applying ochre while perched on uneven rock surfaces. The patterns seem to interact with sunlight. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that the engravings were positioned to catch the rising or setting sun, creating subtle illuminations or shadow effects at specific times of the year. You imagine someone kneeling in the canyon at dawn, observing light shifting across the lines, a gentle ritual synchronized with the sun's movement. Nearby, Traces of small stone tools and faint charcoal suggest that the pigments were ground and applied on site. Historians still argue whether these were purely ceremonial, instructional, or artistic. You imagine the craftsman methodically grinding ochre, testing consistency, and gently brushing it into carved channels, each stroke a meditative act, the slow, repetitive motion echoing a rhythm lost to time. The canyon amplifies sound softly. Fringe speculation proposes that chanting, whispering, or even the wind passing through narrow passages could have interacted with the engravings, enhancing their ceremonial or contemplative effect. You lean back, listening to the faint echo of imagined voices or footsteps, letting the rhythm of time, hands, and natural acoustics seep into your thoughts. As evening shadows stretch across the canyon walls, the pigmented lines seem to glow faintly in the fading light, softening into flowing, abstract shapes. You sit quietly, tracing patterns with your gaze, feeling the slow pulse of human intention preserved in pigment and stone. Historians still debate the purpose, but the ambiguity allows your mind to wander gently. There's a soothing cadence here, patient hands, reflective surfaces, and the subtle interplay of light and color, a quiet meditation that drifts easily into imagination. You step into a windswept plateau dotted with shallow depressions and low stone walls, the ground faintly vibrating under your feet from the soft gusts of wind. At first glance, it appears like eroded agricultural terraces, yet the depressions are uniform and the walls too deliberate to be accidental. You probably won't survive imagining the effort required to shape this landscape without modern tools, but the quiet geometry is strangely comforting. So, before your thoughts drift too far into the wind and stone, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly exploring the plateau. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's walk among these ancient landscape formations together. Mainstream archaeologists often interpret terraces and depressions as agricultural or water management features. Yet this plateau is unusual. The depressions do not align with natural water flow, and the stone walls form patterns that suggest deliberate symbolic or instructional purpose. Historians still argue whether these were functional, ritualistic, or part of a teaching landscape for an ancient community. You kneel beside one depression, feeling the smooth stone and imagining hands patiently shaping earth and rock over long days. The patterns are surprisingly intricate, with concentric circles, subtle spirals, and alignments that seem almost astronomical. Fringe theorists quietly propose that the site may have functioned as a large-scale visual calendar or ceremonial space, where the placement of stones and depressions marked lunar or solar events. You imagine a small group of people walking the lines deliberately, counting days, months, or seasons, their steps measured and rhythmic across the plateau. Nearby, faint charcoal and small stone tools suggest ongoing maintenance or ritual activity. Historians still argue whether these were seasonal gatherings, continuous habitation, or temporary observation sites. You picture artisans or ritual participants tending to the landscape, smoothing edges, adjusting stones, each motion deliberate, slow, and calming, almost meditative. The wind whistles gently through gaps in the stone walls, creating soft, harmonic tones that resonate across the plateau. Fringe speculation suggests that these acoustic effects may have been intentionally enhanced, creating an auditory component to the visual patterns. You pause to listen, imagining the interplay of wind, stone, and human movement forming a subtle symphony, a quiet echo of ancient attention and care. As the sun dips below the horizon, shadows stretch across depressions and walls, softening their edges into gentle curves and patterns. You sit quietly, tracing the lines with your eyes, letting the slow rhythm of human intention and natural forces wash over your thoughts. Historians still debate purpose, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to wander freely. There's a quiet, hypnotic cadence here, patient hands shaping landscape, wind carrying echoes, and the enduring calm of deliberate human effort preserved across centuries. You make your way into a secluded cave tucked beneath a rocky outcrop, the entrance barely wide enough to step through without ducking. The air inside is cool, slightly damp, and carries the faint scent of mineral-rich stone. At first glance, the walls appear unremarkable, but as your eyes adjust, Faint geometric patterns and tiny handprints emerge from the shadows, etched and pressed into the stone with deliberate care. You probably won't survive imagining the patience required to leave such subtle markings in near darkness, but the quiet precision has a surprisingly calming effect. So, before your mind wanders too far into shadowed imagination, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you quietly exploring the cave beside me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's step gently into this subterranean world. Mainstream archaeology often interprets cave markings as ceremonial, instructional, or artistic expressions. Yet these particular etchings are unusual. The geometric patterns don't correspond to known symbolic systems, and the handprints are smaller than those typically documented, suggesting children or miniature tools may have been involved. Historians still argue whether the cave was a ceremonial space, a classroom of sorts, or a hidden gallery meant to be experienced only by select participants. You press your fingers lightly against the faint indentations, imagining quiet hands leaving marks in darkness, guided by patience rather than haste. Scattered stone tools, some with faint traces of ochre, hint that pigments were applied directly in the cave. Fringe theorists speculate that the combination of pigment, geometry, and hand placement may have functioned as an early tactile learning system, perhaps teaching counting rhythm or symbolic storytelling. You imagine a child tracing the grooves, learning through touch, shadow, and slow observation, the quiet hush of the cave amplifying each subtle sound. Nearby, shallow depressions on the floor contain tiny crystal fragments, reflecting dim light and giving the impression of scattered stars. Historians still argue whether these were ritual offerings, decorative enhancements, or accidental deposits. You kneel and let the faint sparkle guide your gaze across the patterns, imagining early humans observing their reflection in the crystals, finding rhythm and meaning in the interplay of light and stone. The cave itself seems to amplify the softest sounds you're breathing, the scratch of fingertips across stone, even the gentle shift of your weight. Fringe speculation suggests the acoustic properties may have been intentional, enhancing meditation, storytelling, or quiet communal rituals. You let the stillness settle around you, tracing patterns with your eyes, feeling the hypnotic cadence of repeated human intention and quiet observation. As twilight outside softens, the cave's shadows deepen, and the etched handprints and geometric patterns blur gently into the walls, creating a dreamlike tapestry. You sit, letting your fingers rest lightly on the stone, the quiet repetition of human hands and slow creation easing your mind. Historians still debate the cave's exact purpose, but the unresolved mystery invites your imagination to drift lazily. There is a gentle lullaby here, patience, quiet learning, and human creativity preserved beneath stone, inviting you to float slowly alongside it. You climb cautiously up a rocky hillside, where the slope is dotted with shallow hollows and faint terraces, the earth soft underfoot with decades of fallen leaves and wind-blown soil. At first glance, it seems like natural erosion, yet the hollows are too uniform, the terraces too deliberate to be accidental. You probably won't survive imagining the long hours required to sculpt this landscape by hand, but the gentle rhythm of repetition is soothing to contemplate. So, before your mind wanders too far along the hillside, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and share your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you quietly exploring this hillside with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's move slowly through these mysterious terraces. Mainstream archaeologists often interpret terraces as agricultural modifications or erosion control. Yet this hillside is unusual. The depressions and terraces form subtle geometric patterns, some aligning with distant peaks and river bends, suggesting intentional planning beyond mere practicality. Historians still argue whether these formations were functional, ceremonial, or symbolic in nature. You run your fingers along a smooth edge, imagining the careful work of countless hands shaping earth and stone with patience and precision. Among the terraces are small stone markers, carved with faint grooves and arranged in repeating sequences. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that these may have served as counting devices, ritual markers, or primitive calendars. You picture someone walking slowly along the terraces, adjusting stones, noting subtle changes in light or shadow, the rhythmic sound of small rocks shifting, creating a meditative soundtrack to their labor. Nearby, traces of charcoal and ash suggest fires may have been used for ritual, signaling, or small-scale material treatment. Historians still argue whether the site was inhabited seasonally, visited only for ceremonies, or maintained as a communal teaching space. You imagine a group gathering along the terraces, the wind softly whispering through the hollows, each person performing quiet tasks, the repetitive actions forming a hypnotic cadence across the hillside. The surrounding landscape is serene, distant mountains, rolling valleys, and the gentle murmur of streams. Fringe speculation proposes that the terraces were intentionally positioned to harmonize with natural lines of sight, perhaps to align with solstices or other seasonal events. You wander slowly, letting your eyes follow the contours, imagining footsteps tracing the terraces in deliberate patterns, a slow, thoughtful choreography of human intention and observation. As evening settles, shadows stretch across hollows and terraces, softening edges into gentle curves. You sit on a flat terrace, letting your fingers brush lightly over the carved stones, absorbing the calm rhythm of human effort and natural forces intertwined. Historians still debate the purpose of the hillside, but the ambiguity allows your imagination to drift, slow and unhurried. There's a quiet music here, hands shaping earth, wind carrying faint echoes, and the serene persistence of human curiosity preserved across time, inviting you to float gently alongside it in thought. You step carefully into a narrow valley where the ground is littered with fragments of pottery, small tools, and strangely shaped stones, all partially buried beneath centuries of soil and leaf litter. At first glance, it seems like a typical archaeological scatter, yet as you bend closer, you notice that some pottery fragments are engraved with sequences of symbols, tiny dots, and spirals arranged in deliberate patterns. You probably won't survive imagining the patience and precision it took to mark each piece, but the quiet rhythm of their creation is oddly soothing. So, before your mind drifts too far into speculation, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And share your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly sifting through fragments with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's examine these small treasures together. Mainstream archaeology often interprets decorated pottery as ritualistic or utilitarian, used for storage, cooking, or symbolic purposes. Yet these fragments are unusual. The sequences of symbols do not match any known writing system, and the repeated motifs suggest deliberate encoding or storytelling. Historians still argue whether the engravings represent counting, communication, or ceremonial meaning. You trace a spiral with your fingertip, feeling the shallow grooves, and imagine artisans carefully marking each piece, perhaps over days or weeks, while the valley air carries a soft breeze that cools their hands. Some fragments are grouped in clusters, hinting that they may have been assembled as part of a larger composition, like a fragmented map or instructional device. Fringe theorists quietly suggest these could have functioned as mnemonic tools, teaching aids, or ritual storytelling fragments. You imagine hands fitting pieces together, aligning symbols carefully, adjusting placement, the tactile rhythm creating a calming meditative effect. Nearby, faint residues of pigment indicate that color may have been applied to emphasize certain symbols or patterns. Historians still argue whether the paint served symbolic, practical, or decorative purposes. You picture the quiet application of pigment, careful strokes enhancing the engravings, a slow, deliberate process filled with focus and patience. The valley itself seems to interact subtly with sound, and light sunlight reflects off smooth fragments, casting soft patterns across the soil, while occasional breezes create gentle clinks and murmurs as pottery shifts slightly. Fringe speculation proposes that these environmental effects may have been intentionally incorporated, enhancing ritual or observational practices. You lean back, letting your gaze wander across the scattered pieces, imagining slow ceremonial movements, quiet teaching, or communal reflection taking place here over centuries. As the light fades, shadows stretch across the fragments, softening edges and blending symbols into gentle patterns. You sit quietly, tracing imaginary lines across the scattered pottery, feeling the slow cadence of human intent echoing through time. Historians still debate the purpose of these fragments, but the unresolved mystery allows your imagination to drift lazily. There's a soothing rhythm here, quiet hands, patient marking, and the subtle whisper of human curiosity preserved in delicate clay, inviting you to float gently alongside it in thought. You step into a wind-swept desert plain, the sand warm beneath your feet, and the horizon shimmering in the heat haze. Scattered across the dunes are large, flat stones etched with delicate, linear patterns that form interconnected networks, almost resembling maps or circuit diagrams. You probably won't survive imagining the patience required to carve these vast networks under the relentless sun, but there's a hypnotic calm in following their lines with your eyes. So, before your mind drifts too far into the desert mirage, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time. It's comforting to picture you here quietly tracing these networks with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's explore these mysterious desert carvings together. Mainstream archaeology often interprets large, scale stone patterns as territorial markers, ceremonial spaces, or astronomical guides. Yet these desert networks are unusual. The lines are interconnected in complex ways, sometimes forming loops and spirals that do not correspond to known astronomical patterns. Historians still argue whether these carvings served practical navigation, symbolic mapping, or spiritual purposes. You crouch beside one stone, brushing sand gently from the grooves, imagining hands carving patiently under the sun, each line an exercise in concentration and patience. Some carvings connect multiple stones across vast distances, hinting at a system far larger than what meets the eye. Fringe theorists quietly speculate that the networks may have represented early proto-cartography, ritual mazes, or even a symbolic representation of knowledge or movement. You imagine people walking along these patterns, tracing lines with their hands or feet, the repetition forming a meditative rhythm that blends human effort with the quiet desert stillness. Nearby, traces of pigments suggest that some stones were once highlighted with red or ochre, accentuating specific nodes or lines. Historians still argue whether these colors were instructional, ceremonial, or purely decorative. You picture careful brushstrokes in the heat, each accentuation deliberate, a soft, methodical rhythm echoing in the desert silence. The wind sweeps across the plain, causing grains of sand to tumble gently along the carvings, softly muting edges while revealing others in unexpected ways. Fringe speculation proposes that the shifting sand may have been intentionally used to animate the patterns over time, creating a subtle dynamic element to the carvings. You stand quietly, letting the wind's soft song mingle with the patterns, imagining centuries of observation, adjustment, and slow, patient meditation along the lines. As the sun begins its descent, shadows lengthen across the stones, softening the intricate networks into flowing, abstract forms. You sit on a warm rock, tracing the grooves with your fingers and letting the hypnotic rhythm of lines, wind, and human effort seep into your mind. Historians still debate the purpose of the networks, but the ambiguity allows your imagination to drift freely. There is a gentle, hypnotic cadence here, patient hands under the sun, the wind carrying soft whispers of time, and the serene persistence of human curiosity etched into the earth, inviting you to float gently along with it. Now, as the last traces of light fade from your mind's horizon, let yourself sink into the quiet rhythm of all the places you've wandered tonight. Think of the coastal shells, the misty valleys, the engraved stones, the forest clay tubes, and the desert networks, all patiently shaped by human hands, each groove, each pattern a gentle echo across centuries. The labor, the care, and the quiet deliberation of these artisans are like soft whispers meant only for those who linger, only for the ones willing to move slowly alongside them. Breathe deeply, letting the imagined textures, colors, and rhythms settle softly around you. The smooth spirals, the faint pigments, the rhythmic arrangement of stones. They are not just artifacts, they are lullabies carved into earth, stone, metal, and clay. Imagine the soft murmur of wind, the gentle crash of waves, the hush of forest leaves, all mingling with human creativity, all combining into a soothing hum that drifts gently into your thoughts. Allow your mind to drift along these quiet patterns, unhurried, suspended between past and present. The mysteries need not be solved tonight. Let their ambiguity cradle you, each unresolved question a soft rhythm, a gentle cadence that rocks you slowly toward rest. Your fingers trace invisible lines in the air, your ears hear the faint echoes of long, gone hands at work, and your imagination floats gently through the corridors of time, feeling the enduring calm of patient creation. Now, with your body and mind softening, your eyelids heavy with this quiet immersion, let all the slow movements, gentle sounds, and meticulous care of human history settle like a warm, comforting blanket. The mysteries are safe, the world is quiet, and you can rest.